British Columbia Institute of Technology acknowledges that our campuses are located on the unceded traditional territories of the Coast Salish nations of Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh.
Good afternoon. My name is Jacob Fraser, and this is your 3:30 news update. A tribal council representing 14 First Nations along Vancouver Island's west coast is declaring a state of emergency due to the opioid crisis. Council members say this is killing their members and leaving others with mental health struggles. They also say not enough is being done, and the nations are asking for help from governments and health authorities. Figures from the First Nations Health Authority show Indigenous people died from drug poisonings at more than 6 times the rate of other BC residents last year. In other health news, British Columbia Health Minister Adrian Dix says minimum nurse-to-patient ratios are set to expand this fall. Dix says these ratios are meant to improve and strengthen the healthcare system. He says the nurse-to-patient ratios have been determined for more hospital settings, including emergency departments, maternity units, and operating rooms. This is part of a 4-year government plan announced last March, with a target of hiring more than 8,000 nurses. Police in Langley say one person has died in an early morning crash between a car and motorcycle on Highway 1. Mounties say the vehicles collided heading east shortly before 4:20 a.m. The eastbound lanes of the highway remain closed between 232nd and 264th Street. RCMP is asking anyone who witnessed the crash or who may have dashcam footage from the area to call them. The 2023 Disability Without Poverty report card evaluated the Canadian government's, quote, performance towards people with disabilities who live in poverty, end quote, with an I for incomplete. Reporter Sophie Hansen has more on the reason behind the low letter grade.
The report shared that people with disabilities face systemic barriers to achieving and maintaining jobs, housing security, and income support, as well as resources to live adequately. Ken Boyce, a disability activist, says the new Canadian disability benefit is heavily restricted and difficult to navigate, adding to the overall sense of exclusion.
The amount that I saw my quality of life decrease, not just because of my illness, but because of the incredible restrictions that come with even accepting these very minimal benefits, really puts you at a disadvantage compared to able-bodied Canadians.
Boyce intends to continue her activism, but urges the government to invite those with disabilities to participate in discussions. Sophie Hansen, BCIT's The Crow.
Sophie now joins us live. Sophie, what is an example of one of the restrictions of Canada's disability benefit?
So an example that was shared with me was the fact that no disabled person in Canada can live with a romantic partner for more than 12 months without losing their financial benefits as well as their medical autonomy to their partner, even if the partner is simply just a boyfriend or a girlfriend.
What is one way that Ken suggested the government move forward in building better relationships and accountability with people with disabilities?
Well, Ken told me that systemic change will always require discussions with those who are most impacted. In other words, that means including those with disabilities in processes of creating and implementing laws and policies that pertain to people with disabilities.
Thank you, Sophie. Over to Alberta, the mayor of Fort Saskatchewan, Alberta, is apologizing after musing about the old days of managing feral cats by, quote, throwing them in the river, end quote.
Fort Saskatchewan Mayor Gail Catcher says her comments fell short of her city's values of compassion, respect, and care. It comes after a recent meeting about managing feral cat numbers, where Catcher said growing up, farmers placed them in bags and threw them in the river or gassed them with exhaust pipes. Animal rights advocates have denounced her remarks as cruel and outdated. Catcher says she plans to make sure Fort Saskatchewan's approach to managing animal populations is humane and responsible. Aaron Sousa, The Canadian Press.
In other Alberta news, the Alberta government is providing $149 million to cover costs for the town of Jasper. This comes after the devastating wildfires which destroyed a third of the town. Residents affected are not able to access the funding, but Jasper can use the money to cover staff overtime, emergency food and shelter, along with other administrative expenses. Emergency Services Minister Mike Ellis says the funding will help speed up Jasper's recovery. Jasper Mayor Richard Ireland says the community is grateful for the province's support, and the funding will be critical to rebuilding. Over to politics, Pablo Rodriguez has resigned as Canada's transport minister and the government's Quebec lieutenant, so he can run for leadership of the provincial Liberal Party.
A senior government official told the Canadian press that a new transport minister will be installed at a ceremony at Rideau Hall this afternoon. Rodriguez says he's also leaving Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's Liberal caucus so that he can set his own priorities and focus on Quebec. He plans to sit as an independent member of Parliament until next January, saying that will avoid an expensive by-election so close to the next federal election. Rodriguez says he doesn't want an election right away and will vote against the non-confidence motion the Conservatives plan to introduce next week. His resignation comes the same week as the Liberals lost a key by-election in a stronghold riding in Montreal to the Bloc Québécois. Nujoud Almalis, the Canadian Press, Ottawa.
In more political news, New Brunswick Premier Blaine Higgs has called an election for October 21st. The 33-day campaign is expected to focus on pocketbook issues and the government's approach to gender identity policies.
The 70-year-old Higgs is seeking a third term in office. Recently, his Progressive Conservatives promised to lower the provincial HST by 2 percentage points to 13% if re-elected. His main rivals, Liberal leader Susan Holt and Green Party leader David Kuhn, are focusing on economic and social issues. Holt has promised to impose a rent cap, while Kuhn has said a Green government would create an electricity support program. At dissolution, the Conservatives held 25 seats in the 49-seat legislature. The Liberals held 16, the Greens had 3, and there was 1 independent and 4 vacancies. Keith Doucette, the Canadian Press.
Over to Manitoba, a Manitoba cabinet minister says he accepts the outcome of an investigation that found he breached ethics rules by failing to disclose he had a business contract with the government. The province's ethics commissioner, Ian Bushy, found that Ian Bushy, who was the Minister of Municipal and Northern Affairs, violated the Conflict of Interest Act. However, it was determined the breach was inadvertent and there should be no penalty. Bushy says he accepts full responsibility for the mistake. In U.S. news, U.S. President Joe Biden's son, Hunter Biden, will be sentenced on felony firearms charges in December after a judge agreed to a delay requested by the defense.
The judge has agreed to a delay requested by Biden's lawyers, who say they need more time to prepare. Biden was scheduled to be sentenced November 13th. In June, President Biden's son was convicted in Delaware federal court of 3 felonies for purchasing a gun in 2018, when prosecutors say he lied on a federal form by claiming he was not illegally using or addicted to drugs. The gun charges are punishable by up to 25 years in prison, but it's possible Hunter Biden will likely face far less time behind bars or possibly avoid prison time entirely. I'm Mike Hempen.
The Michigan Court of Appeals has ruled in favor of the Oxford School District in a lawsuit that seeks to hold employees partly responsible for a shooting in 2021.
Prior to the attack, staff had expressed concerns about shooter Ethan Crumbley, but the court said that lawyers for the families have not offered evidence that shows Oxford staff were the proximate cause of the tragedy. The court says it was Crumbley who made the decision to bring a gun to Oxford High School in 2021. The court also says governmental immunity applies. I'm Haya Panjwani.
In international news, Israeli security officials say an Israeli citizen has been indicted for involvement in an Iranian assassination plot against top Israeli leaders.
Israel's security agency arresting an Israeli citizen allegedly recruited by Iran to plot the assassination of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and other top leaders. The Shin Bet claims 73-year-old Moti Maman secretly visited Iran twice since April, agreeing initially to spy and scout locations and later to advance plans to assassinate Netanyahu. Maman allegedly demanding $1 million, investigators nabbing Maman before that sum ever came in. Jordana Miller, ABC News, Jerusalem.
It is currently 18 degrees and partly cloudy, with the rest of the day looking mostly cloudy, reaching a low of 11 overnight. Tomorrow it is expected to reach a high of 18 and partly cloudy, and showers are expected over the weekend. That has been your 3:30 news update. I'm Jacob Fraser for BCIT's The Crow.
Stay tuned for more on BCIT's 1680 The Crow.
everything is changing to digital. Everything is online. People aren't just waiting for the 6 o'clock news anymore. People want their news right now. They want to be able to go onto their smartphone, onto the internet, and see the news that they want to see.
Vancouver is growing at, a really rapid rate, the Lower Mainland even, and with the tools that we're given here, we're able to cover all of that.
Welcome to BCIT Magazine. I'm Radhika Sikakane.
In the program, they really leave it up to you. I mean, the help is there when you need it, figuring out how to use the programs like Premiere, Audition, and figuring out how to use the cameras. But it's up to you to sort of experiment and figure out what you can do when you go out in the field.
They brought candles and flowers to remember the student who lost her life yesterday.
Theresa May says the international community condemns Moscow.
They really make sure that you know the basics and you are able to put out a quality product.
I'm Brady Tretanero.
And I'm Radhika Sikakane. Thank you for tuning in to BCIT Magazine.